Well, my role as Secretary of Treasury, I've been in the role actually just on 12 months, 2 days ago, so it's gone very quickly. But my background really, I mean my background as a banker, and that's where most of my career has been. But I entered government on a part-time basis around 5 years ago when Barry O'Farrell was elected and looking to drive major service reform across government. And so I led that for a number of years, both in terms of creation of Service New South Wales, which most folk would probably be familiar with, but also more broadly around getting a service ethic embedded across government, including cabinet and a whole range of things that went with that. So it was an interesting journey and certainly different from my banking career. I also spent 5 years as Deputy Chancellor at Western Sydney Uni, so touch of academia in that as well, which has been a good balance. And now into this job, which in many ways fits hand in glove with my finance background, but has a key role in influencing government on a whole range of issues. We have a great team in Treasury, one that I'm really proud of and pleased to work with, but opportunities to improve always. So we're working on culture and we're working on leadership and getting to see our clusters, our agencies as customers, what that means. It doesn't always mean, by the way, you say yes, but you don't say no without optionality around that. So we're working through those things. So it's a good time, but a busy time, of course, with an election coming up in March of next year.
I had the good fortune of meeting with you shortly after you began, and we talked about one of your passions being culture, and wanting to really lead on that front, and particularly around flexibility. Tell us a little bit about what you've done in the space around flexibility and what your vision is for flexibility at Treasury.
Well, I think, from my lens, I mean, we live in such a rapidly changing world where many of the traditional processes and procedures and rules that we've grown up with just don't work anymore. And so the world of increasing ambiguity, to me, hand in hand with that goes more flexibility in the way we think about work and what that means. And workforce flexibility, if you just looked at it through one lens, with my background of commercial, it's just a smart thing to do if you didn't think about anything else. I mean, it makes good business sense in a world of real demand around good resources and how you keep and retain and develop those resources. It makes good business sense to be flexible in your work practice. But apart from that, I mean, there are many more reasons, and I think primarily I would say it's about respecting the individual. I mean, I grew up personally in a commercial world where none of that was in place, and you work very long days and you work weekends, and no respect was given to a person's individual circumstances, family, etc. And so you had to make that do, and often that wasn't, working for you. So I think as a boss and leader of Treasury, it's my responsibility to lead the way on that, and the opportunities, I think, to support people, give them a more flexible environment and focus on the outcome, not on where they happen to be sitting or, be it at home, in the office or wherever, but what I'm asking you to achieve and deliver. And then, we're all mature people, give people the responsibility to work around that. I think it's a great sort of value proposition that Treasury can offer, and I'm really quite excited about the opportunities to take that forward.
It's also a key enabler of gender equality,
yes,
which has obviously been a New South Wales Premier focus and initiative for the past few years. What's your experience and what's your vision for gender equality?
Well, look, I think a lot of executives like me talk about gender equality, and then it's difficult to execute plans around that. I don't think any modern day contemporary executive would argue against that. I think we're through that debate now. I think the debate's more about how you execute against it and get traction. To me, flexibility is a great way to do that, because clearly, from a gender point of view, what we ask of women in particularly senior jobs is very demanding in terms of balancing broader demands, often children and home and a whole range of things. I don't think men often appreciate that. I mean, recently my wife was away for a week, and I've only got one daughter at home now, but I had the challenge of a daughter at school, 2 dogs, and a job, and I found that pretty challenging for a week. So from that point of view, whatever we can support by way of gender equality around flexibility makes a huge amount of sense. But it's much more than that, of course. I mean, it's around pay and a whole range of things, the way we operate.
Tell us about, you talk about you've got 2 daughters. What was it like for you becoming a parent? And also, what was your experience as a family and the differences that you faced from a career perspective compared to that of your partner?
Look, I've got 3 daughters.
Oh, 3 daughters, so.
Yeah, after the 3rd one I gave up then because I figured I was never going to see a boy. So we have in our family, of course, 3 daughters, my wife, and 2 female dogs. There's no male to be seen anywhere, so I have no idea how to bring up boys. But and I also, my wife would say, I have no idea how to bring up daughters either. Although daughters tend to stay with their dad on lots of things. But look, it's been a learning experience for me too as we've gone along. I mean, I'd say to you early in my career, I really struggled with how to balance home life, family, and as I said, there was no sort of sense of flexibility at work. You had to be seen, literally had to be seen in the office, and you would never go before the boss went. I mean, that was not a career enhancing practice. But over the years, I've learnt a lot from how to better refine, how to better manage those dynamics. And that's also why I'm a strong supporter of flexibility at work, because I get it. And I do things now that, for my 3rd daughter at home, she's in year 9 this year, I would never miss key school events. That's in my calendar and it happens. Every Friday night, my wife and I take a bottle of wine with my daughter and we have dinner at the local restaurants. And that's a catch-up night, catch up on school for the week, catch up on other things. And I'm quite precious about that. I mean, those things are diaried, and it's a bit sad you've got to diary your personal life around that, but it's a discipline of making sure it happens, So we do that. I spend a lot of time with my daughter on her homework, her study. We role play stuff, we have fun together, So it's just creating the space to make sure that happens.
And prioritising the rituals that are most important to you too.
Absolutely.
Or you as a family.
Yeah. And I think, look, also having a 14-year-old, it also keeps you in tune with what's happening in the world at that, their whole life is around mobiles and technology and, Twitter and everything else. So keeps you pretty well in touch with that too.
Yeah, it's a new world.
It's very much a new world.
In a world, I guess, where we're also seeing changes for men in the context of gender equality, and one of the initiatives is encouraging men to work more flexibly and men to take parental leave. How do you see that playing out compared to, say, your experience?
Well, I think it's a really important issue for us to really follow through on, because equally, men have these challenges, as I've just talked about with my own experience. So, but it's for us to really drive it as leaders. And the way I think about that in Treasury is that I've said to the managers of people in Treasury, I'm holding you accountable for your team. It's not a gender issue, more broadly, how do you focus on flexibility? Because needs will be different, whether you're male or female, frankly, the needs for each person will be different. And so I can't know that from where I sit, but the local manager should. And that local manager I'm holding accountable to really drive this through. And what works for one won't work for another, but there will be an answer in our practices and the way we go about this. So it's really important we see this as a total workforce initiative.
Which is why you've no doubt introduced that concept of care for self, care for others, and care for the community, which really does start to break down the gender-specific barriers and the care-specific barriers in terms of the traditional view of who actually gets access to flexibility.
Absolutely. Look, I think, we, as working in government, you start from a basis of people that work in government do care for their community and broader policy-related issues. I would say more than the corporate world, although the corporate world is starting to wake up on a lot of this now, which is about time. So I think the starting proposition in government is you probably have a fair bit of that already. What we don't have though is the way we lead people, and some of the issues you and I have been talking about. That has to change.
We know that there are very few leaders in the public service who work part-time, yet there's a huge bank of potential talent out there looking for part-time work. What's your message to people thinking about applying for a job at Treasury in a part-time capacity?
Well, look, obviously I would encourage it. I mean, the first point for me is what is the requirements of what we need to get done? And then obviously what are the capabilities and skill sets on the back of that enable us to achieve that outcome? I'm completely agnostic, frankly, about whether it's full-time, part-time, casual, whatever that sort of structure is. I'm focused on very much what do we need to deliver and what the outcome is. And so that's where I will come from with any of these things. You know, I remember in my career at one point, certainly in banking, part-time status had this really negative connotation to it. And if you look at it through a part-timer's eyes, you know, they're not in the office all the time. They're left out of conversations. They've got to come in and pick up issues when they haven't been around. It's pretty challenging. And so trying to create an environment where that's just a given and we're inclusive, whether you're part-time, full-time, casual or whatever your status is a really important focus for me. So I don't see part-time any different to any other status at all.
The focus is inclusion.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us, Mark. Look forward to seeing you again soon.
That's fine, thank you.